I played quarterback at USC. I recognize that can lead to some bias when I'm talking about the Trojans. Still, this is not delusional propaganda when I say the USC Trojans, college football's most consequential program, in the most consequential era of the sport, in its most consequential season, has its most consequential stretch of games this month. Now, there are strong claims in that sentence, 4 to be exact. And because this is not network TV and this is YouTube, I'm not just going to give you my hot takes and let them sit there and tell you to trust me. I'm going to let you break down each one and let you decide for yourself, starting with the most controversial. USC is this sport's most consequential program. The dictionary defines consequential as having significant consequences and defines significance as having influence of a measurably or noticeably large amount. So we're looking at two things: measurable influence and noticeable influence. In terms of measurable influence, no program has produced more Heisman winners than USC. No program has produced more NFL draft picks. West of the Mississippi, nobody has more national championships. In terms of noticeable influence, USC is the Western outpost for college football. Yeah, Cal and Stanford started a handful of years earlier, but USC was the first program to prove your distance from the birthplace of football doesn't have any bearing on your distance away from a national title. Oregon is the top dog on the West Coast right now, but they can talk to me about noticeable influence when they stay there for 60 years. USC and Miami are the only football programs this century with a legitimate claim to being the main sports attraction in a pro town. It's incredibly rare, usually short-lived, and proof of noticeable influence. I get it, this concept has inescapable subjectivity, but the combination of these two things, USC's measurable influence and USC's notable influence, give the Trojans as good of a case as anybody for the most consequential program in college football. But if this is just another typical decade for USC, who cares? It's not. This is the most consequential era in the history of college football. Over the last 5 years, the sport has gone through its most significant changes since Walter Camp invented the quarterback. In 2021, players were allowed to transfer schools and play immediately without sitting out for a season. That same year, players were allowed to make money on their name, image, and likeness for the first time. Also a very relevant subject to USC. In 2024, schools were allowed to pay players directly. College football let go of amateurism and got free agency, contracts, and player brand deals all at once. On top of that, conference realignment, which USC played a key role in, is shifting almost all the power in the sport to two conferences whose commissioners and university programs are unaligned and unclear on their plan for the future, except for securing the most money for themselves at the expense of every other program in the sport. Nobody knows the specific long-tail effects of what these changes will be. But we do know every time there are significant changes in this sport, there are proportionate consequences. That's what makes this era the most consequential, the fact that it's the one with the most change. If we look at history, there's one consequence that's practically a certainty. Programs everyone thought were mainstays at the top of the college football landscape slip through the cracks and become less consequential or even irrelevant in the next era. The past is riddled with examples. Princeton, Harvard, and Yale in the 1800s. Pitt in 1910 with Pop Warner at the helm. Cal in the 1920s. Minnesota in the 1930s. Army in the 1940s, SMU in the 1980s, Nebraska in the 1990s, and Virginia Tech in the 2000s. Each of these programs were thought to be a permanent fixture in college football's higher ranks. But just because you're competing for championships, just because it feels like you're a marquee brand, it doesn't mean you can't lose your spot at the top. 5 years ago, it was unquestioned that USC was a top 5 head coaching job in college football. 5 years from now, where will it be? The fact that we can't answer that question with certainty is evidence this era is the most consequential in the history of the sport. So, what'll determine USC's success in this era? How can it remain a blue blood? That brings us to 2025, the most consequential season in determining USC's place in this new era. As fans, we tend to treat each season as a standalone chapter. But in reality, the choices and ripple effects from one season bleed directly into the next. Media and even some programs underestimate just how much the results of a single season can impact the trajectory of your program 5 or even 10 years down the road. Go back to 2012. That's the year I committed to USC. USC started the offseason and week 1 ranked as the #1 team in the country. If that season doesn't completely flop, then Lane Kiffin probably isn't fired as early as he was the next year. And if Kiffin isn't fired, then Sark likely likely never gets hired. And if Sark never gets hired, then the Helton chapter never takes hold, because Helton was under Sark and Kim. The full details of that butterfly effect belong in its own separate video, but the point is, if that 2012 season had gone differently, USC's trajectory for the entire next decade is on a completely different course. And that's why the current season matters so much. It's not just about what happens in 2025, it's the foundation it sets. And the most critical factor in determining the quality of that foundation in this era is your program's financial backing. Ohio State won a championship in 2024 with the most expensive roster in college football. This year, a $25 million roster got Texas Tech from 6th in the Big 12 a year ago to being the favorites to win the conference and undefeated 5 weeks in. Based on what I hear and what reports are able to dig up, you need between $25 million and $30 million minimum to put together a roster that can win a college football playoff game right now. Some teams are even going higher. So the question becomes, how does a program secure that funding? It's all in the story that the program's able to tell to the folks with the money. That story needs to have some key parts, and they're not just a beginning, middle, and end. The key parts are ROI and encouraging projections. ROI, return on investment. You got to show that you can take this funding and turn it into a quality product on the field. Lincoln Riley's record in his first 3 seasons at USC was 11-3, 8-5, and 7-6. USC is perceived as a program with huge resources, but internally, the investment wasn't matching that perception. It's well documented within the Trojan circles that the program was operating with like a $20 million roster for Lincoln's first few seasons. Because they were competitive with that number in 2022, you kind of think that you can just continue at that level. You're having to wake up your donor base to the realities of the new landscape of college football. They learned the hard way the last 2 years that 20 mil, that ain't gonna get it done. This offseason, the budget for USC's roster allegedly, from what I've heard, jumped closer to $30 million, with the potential to have it rise even higher in the years to come. In June 2025, Steve Wiltfong of On3 said USC is the most powerful NIL program in the country right now by my estimation. This year could be the catalyst for USC putting together the most expensive roster in college football in 2026. Or it could be the reason the USC football staff has to put a lot more hours into selling a brand new version to the same old donors to give them a lot less money. The second key part a story needs in order to sell boosters is encouraging projections. You have to have a solid case that further investment will have compounding results. USC has that right now. Lincoln Riley, new general manager Chad Bowden, and associate AD Dave Emmerich have put together the #1 ranked recruiting class in the country for 2026. But that ranking doesn't mean as much until those commitments turn into actual signees on December 3rd. And that timing brings us to our last claim. The Trojans' next 3 games are the most consequential stretch in this. The Trojans' most consequential season. If USC goes 3-0 in their next 3 games, they'll likely finish the year with 10 wins. They get Iowa, Northwestern, and UCLA all at home in the month following this stretch. Those 10 wins will establish them as a legitimate Big Ten title contender, and they would almost certainly have a spot in the college football playoff. That financial backing, plus the wins on the field, keep the recruiting class intact. It is important to note that that signing class will actually sign before the college football playoff's final selection date on December 7th. The pitch to Jade Mayava to return in 2026 to chase the title gets stronger, as is the pitch that USC can make to any prospective dude in the transfer portal window. But if USC goes 0-3, the best they can hope for is 8-4. They'll start to be solidified in the Tier 2 or even Tier 3 of the Big Ten. If Tier 1 is Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State, Tier 2 is Indiana, Illinois, Iowa. And Tier 3 would be, Nebraska, Minnesota, Washington, Wisconsin. At least right now in 2025. They will need to spend significantly more time trying to secure the same or even less financial backing for 2026. Again, the time piece is huge with this. It's spent there instead of improvements elsewhere. The 2026 recruiting class probably sees significant decommitments before that December 3rd deadline. The pitch to transfers is not as appealing. And ultimately, everyone continues to question whether or not USC can contend for a title in the new Big Ten. This month is going to be pointed at as the month that everything everything changed one way or another. So it has much on the line. Let's break down the games. October 11th, Michigan has to play USC at their house for the first time since 1957. This was the matchup everyone nationally circled when conference realignment was announced. Michigan coming to the Coliseum. This is about USC protecting their home field and their home coast. Yes, they've entered Michigan's conference, but this is their home turf. The key question, can USC step up physically to a Michigan program that last year imposed their will on the Trojans when it mattered most? Remember, USC had a fourth quarter lead until Michigan went on an 89-yard, 10-play drive and punched it in with 37 seconds remaining. This is the Trojans' chance to show ROI on the investment made in the trenches. The very next week, October 18th, the Trojans will be playing in South Bend versus Notre Dame. The Irish have not lost to USC on their home field in 14 years. And I hate to say it, but Notre Dame has shown that they're outdoing USC when it comes to adapting to this new era. They've modernized. They have a young, energetic coach who's injected fresh energy into an old school brand. USC is trying to replicate that playbook. This 2025 matchup isn't just about rivalry bragging rights. It's a measuring stick for how USC's own rejuvenation is playing out. It's 1 week off and then another road trip, this time to Lincoln, Nebraska. The Cornhuskers are a full generation removed from their dynasty. Shoot, maybe 2 generations. The fact that they have to start the sentence of when they last won a championship with 19 is a little off-putting or irrelevant to recruits. But I'll admit, USC's answer of 04 is gonna start to have a very similar effect. Nebraska is exactly what USC doesn't want to be, and yet they're looking more and more similar as the years go on, especially if they stay on this course for the next 5 years. They need to differentiate themselves here, not just for what it does in the win column, but for what it symbolizes. There's only room for probably one blue blood program to get resurrected. Those are the 3, the most consequential games in the most consequential season, in the most consequential era, for the most consequential program in college football. It'll change everything, but one thing, it's always fight on. And if you've watched this far, I gotta know what you think. I don't care if it's about USC, this era, or whatever college football take you got. You've heard me out this long, I wanna know what you think. See you in the comments.